We have Chief Alvaro here, Chief Barb, and Captain Winstead. They're going to go over the EMS reorg. I sent you guys the one pager. I'm sure that's going to be covered today. He has a PowerPoint also. That's how we're going to stay on track. We can ask questions as we go. It's a discussion. And then when we're done, Chief Skimmerhorn is going to go over a few things with us. So, Chief Alvaro.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Awesome. Okay, just an opportunity. We're just doing a morning Teams meeting just to make sure that whatever questions you folks have, we can answer. We just wrapped up the EMS ODA over the last 2 weeks for those new in the role for the single role provider, the EMS specialist, and also the EMS supervisor. So that was just completed. So this Teams meeting, just an opportunity just to make sure we're all on the same page, dispel any rumors, and make sure that we provide accurate information. After yesterday's meeting, Captain Winstead did come up with a PowerPoint just to kind of guide the discussion, and hopefully that'll cover whatever questions you may have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Captain Winstead.
Thank you, sir. Trying to get PowerPoint up. Do you guys have my screen? FCFRD, EMS operations, reorg. All right, awesome. So thank you guys for taking the time this morning. Like Chief Alvaro mentioned, the big goal here is to make sure that there's consistent messaging and that everybody's on the same page of exactly what the goals of this program are, how it's going to impact you guys, and really the primary directive of making sure that the system that we're putting forward works for the field and for operations in general. So the reason for these changes, obviously there's a fiscal component associated with the changes that impacted special operations, all of the work schedules, and we need to make sure that we're carrying forward a fiscal responsibility component with how we are doing EMS supervision and leadership in the field. Really, we wanted to make sure that we were able to provide an advanced scope of practice 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The EMS Specialist Pilot Program was a good proof of concept for the ability for us to train and maintain those skills, but obviously the work schedule wasn't conducive to having it available to all of the citizens and visitors of Fairfax County all of the time. So we're trying to make sure that we bridge that gap. We want to make sure that we're providing equitable opportunities for providers at all ranks to be involved in EMS, and the lieutenant rank was the big gap that existed previously. We're bridging that gap with having a total of 8 lieutenants that are assigned full-time to these EMS positions, and we're hoping to continue to move that forward with expanding it to other ranks as well as we can safely and appropriately do. We also want to enhance the efficiency of operations. You guys hear it every single day. You're either on the calls or aware of the calls. The EMS box alarm, especially that second call that occurs where you're getting 2 AFR units for a single patient event. You're getting 2 transport units for a single patient event. And we recognize that that is not the best way for us to achieve our necessary response, specifically that second ALS provider or 6 personnel. So we're working to make sure that with CAD as well as DASM that we're providing the correct response, not just simply sending large apparatus on every single call. So what is changing on August 9th? Obviously, we currently have 5 EMS supervisors all at the rank of captain. On August 9th, there will be 3 EMS supervisors at the captain rank, 3 EMS specialists at the lieutenant rank, 1 peak staffed EMS specialist unit that is from 0500 to 1900 Monday through Saturday, and then 1 program manager, which is my position, which is a field capable unit, but my primary directive is making sure that there is direct oversight for the training, education, and operations of these individuals, specifically at the lieutenant rank, but working hand in hand with Chief Barb to make sure that the supervisors and specialists are all on the same page. You guys should have received the administrative map that was sent out by Chief Alvaro earlier last week. GIS worked greatly with us to make sure that we were able to come up with an equitable distribution of how we're going to supervise and break up the workload. The administrative tasks that this map represents are the training responsibilities, mentorship responsibilities, clinical oversight and review, target hazard management, so specifically the large event spaces, the places that we know there's a high likelihood of EMS events, as well as we consider some of our target hazards to be the hospitals and healthcare systems that we interact with. And then also management of equipment needs. These are not necessarily reflections of where those units will be dispatched to. We're all aware that CAD has a separate algorithm for picking the closest appropriate unit, and we'll talk some about the dispatch changes that come along with this. But when you're looking at this map, if you're wondering what the color coding specifically is relating to, that is essentially the 12-minute drive time that was put in there by GIS. It provides a good idea of how long it would take for units to get to those different locations, but it's not the direct line of why those stations were chosen. Essentially, we've broken this up into 3 EMS zones where an EMS supervisor and an EMS specialist are sharing the responsibility within that zone. So EMS Zone 1 includes EMS 401 operating out of Station 42 with 8 stations assigned to it. All of the supervisor stations, the captains, are responsible for a total of 8 work locations. And then the lieutenants are responsible for a total of 5 work locations. So ALS 401 is operating out of Station 31 with a total of 5 work locations that they are responsible for. EMS 402 is where EMS 405 currently operates out of, Station 27, and again, responsible for a total of 8 work locations. EMS Zone 2 is a little bit challenging for us to get coverage, partially because of the geographic gaps that exist when you're trying to operate around Fort Belvoir, and also the fact that there is a substantially large amount of rural and sparsely populated areas. So we recognize that these are challenging places to get to. Gunston and Lorton is a very far stretch for EMS 402, so we expect that ALS 402 may be running some calls down into those areas. That obviously is going to be augmented during the daytime based off of ALS 404 running out of Station 5. And we'll talk a little bit more about that unit specifically. But we acknowledge that there are gaps and challenges here, the same way that currently with 5 EMS supervisors, we have gaps and challenges. EMS 403 is splitting the middle of the county, and that zone includes EMS 403 as well as ALS 403. EMS 403 is operating out of Station 418, and they have a total of 8 work locations that they are responsible for. The furthest one and probably the biggest mindset shift for this unit is going to be Station 34, because again, they're butting right against Fairfax City, and then the rest of their area is generally fairly rural and sparsely populated. So again, they will likely be running with one of the ALS units more frequently, such as ALS 403 or ALS 401. ALS 403 is operating out of Fire Station 17 with a coverage of 5 stations. The intent with ALS 403 being located where they are is the rapid access to the major highway thoroughfares, but also to provide better coverage into the Clifton area to avoid Medic 32 being dispatched every single time that Ambulance 16 is dispatched on an Alpha event. Again, avoiding that EMS box alarm. We're not 100% certain if the CAD changes that have occurred are fully implemented in an effective means, and you're going to need to bear with us as we work through this. Of if there's a problem, we make changes. We know that we're going to have to be constantly engaged with CAD branch as well as you in the field and DASM so that we're actually achieving the goals of the program. Do you have any questions about work locations or intended reasons why we broke things up? Hearing none immediately, we'll jump forward to chain of command. So who do they report to? And bear in mind, there's the chain of command that is the rank structure, but every single one of the individuals who attended these ODAs and every single person that is involved in field EMS supervision moving forward is being imparted with the same messaging of, hey, you need to work with the folks that you run calls with. You need to get to know your providers. You need to know the station level leadership. You need to know the individual providers as well so that you can foster that collaborative and collegial approach to doing our job. Just because somebody doesn't report directly to you doesn't mean that they don't have reasonable input on how we can better improve this. So the EMS lieutenants at all of the ALS zones are reporting to their respective EMS supervisor. So ALS 401 reports to EMS 401 on their shift. The same with all of the other ones. The one outlier, obviously, is the peak staffed unit, ALS 404. And they report to me for chain of command, but they also are aware that they have a very close relationship with Tower 405's officer because they're going to be working on the same shift and they're going to be working the same schedule. So making sure that that relationship is built and appropriately managed. The EMS captains report to Chief Barb as the battalion chief of EMS operations. And they all also need to be seeking and soliciting input from the deputy chiefs in each of the respective areas that they're operating. Obviously, we are going to be actively and aggressively talking with you guys to find out what's working well, what needs to be changed, what needs to be altered to ensure that the goals that EMS division is setting forward are in line with what operations needs and that they're actually being achieved the way that we anticipate. And that relationship is only going to need to grow. Obviously, we all then report to Deputy Chief Alvaro from the EMS division with significant input and direction from the Office of the Medical Director, as well as quality management and oversight. The difference between an EMS supervisor and a specialist, and I'll throw the first caveat out there that the original design of this program was for there to be an EMS specialist in every single battalion, and those would be overseen by an EMS supervisor. Fiscally, we do not have the ability to implement this program right now. So from an operational perspective, there is very little difference between an EMS supervisor and an EMS specialist when they show up on your scene on day one. They're dispatched interchangeably. So if an EMS supervisor is due on a call, you'll get either the closest ALS unit or the closest EMS unit. It is not necessarily going to always be the EMS captain or the EMS lieutenant, for lack of a better term. So operationally, they will be showing up. They'll be operating in some of the roles that we'll discuss shortly, and there's not going to be a huge difference there. Administratively, there is a very large difference between what a specialist and a supervisor does. Essentially, a specialist is there to mentor, to model excellence, and to avoid problems happening, and to be the intake point for simple problems so that we can get them solved. So somebody has a monitor-related issue that they need to work through from logistics. Somebody has a question related to how they can get into the VCU paramedic program. Somebody has basic administrative questions. I got a call already this morning about a CH751 key that's broken. That type of stuff is going to be managed by the specialists. That's perfectly fine. Where it will get elevated to a supervisor is when an issue exists. So the EMS inquiry process, the investigations, performance improvement plans, management of the ALS internship process within their EMS zone, that's all stuff that needs to happen at a captain level. So that's going to remain with the EMS supervisors. From a very specific instance where operationally there is a difference, emergency custody orders are going to require that an EMS supervisor be involved and on the scene. So if we're talking about taking away somebody's civil liberties because they don't have the capacity to make decisions for themselves from a medical perspective, they're going to have an EMS supervisor on scene. We did a lot of education in the 2-week ODA related to this. This is not applying to paperless ECOs that are generated by the police department or an ECO that has already been generated by the magistrate and we're assisting with transport. This is the processing and decision making related to the fire and rescue department petitioning for an ECO. We're talking about one call a year where this actually fully occurs. So it is not a common thing. We want to make sure that our highest ranked EMS provider in the field is involved in making those decisions. The EMS supervisors are also, for at least the first 90 days, but for the foreseeable future, will remain as the field quality assurance folks. They will continue to do CQI for their zone. That allows the lieutenants who are stepping into these EMS specialist roles to become comfortable, to get used to running calls, and to address the things that are immediate needs from their own competence perspective. And then as we work with Beth Adams on making a decision of when we will expand that out, they may take on a role with CQI. Supervisors are also the one that's going to be heavily involved with CRT integration. We're working very heavily with Kitty Murray and the other folks at CRT to develop out a field and operations awareness of what's happening with some of our super utilizers, as opposed to it being two silos existing where CRT is involved and operations are involved, but maybe the information sharing doesn't exist. And then obviously the supervisors will be the ones that are monitoring what's going on within the system and making decisions about, do we need to move folks to areas of higher peak utilization as the day goes on, leveraging some of the tools that already exist, like Rescue Vision. What calls are they dispatched on automatically? All EMS supervisor calls are going to be dispatched again, either with a supervisor or a specialist based off of the closest geographic unit. So that includes the CPRs, the shootings, stabbings, drownings, accident with entrapment, suicide attempts, and all building fire events. The changes to the dispatch algorithm are focused heavily on alpha event types. So the EMS level 1 And again, the goal with that is for us to not be sending multiple of the same unit type. So if you need a second ALS provider, the goal is not to have engine 40 and truck 40 both dispatched with their ambulance to achieve getting 2 paramedics on that call. The intent is for us to send an AFR and a transport unit and the closest EMS or ALS unit to augment that. That change went into effect on July 12th, and we have a meeting with both CAD as well as John Morrison to sit down and figure out, has the change that we've implemented of a 10-minute distance, is that sufficient to achieve our goals, or do we need to make additional changes? So again, we're satisficing our way through this, making sure that we're actually achieving our goal with small incremental changes and not swinging the pendulum in one direction or the other. For the field providers who are asking, who do I call when I have an issue? If you're on scene and you're requesting something to your scene, you can request either an EMS supervisor or an EMS specialist. DPSC is going to dispatch whichever of those 2 units is closer. They're not specifically going to seek out EMS 401 versus ALS 401 without there being a large reason for that. And again, from an operational perspective, there's a very narrow subset of patients that there may be a difference made of a captain versus a lieutenant. In either setting, the lieutenants are also able to assist with the aid to decision-making capacity. And if they feel that the patient may need to receive an emergency custody order, then they can elevate that up their chain of command. If they have a specific need for a clinical capability, such as a blood-capable unit, an RSI-capable unit, or a ventilator-capable unit, just like they currently do, they should ask for what they need. Hey, I need blood, and DPSC will dispatch that closest unit. That may not necessarily be a Fairfax County Fire and Rescue Department unit. Like, we know that 2 of the police medics carry blood and are RSI capable. They are able to be sought through CAD. So they need to be asking for what they actually need. If they have administrative issues that they need to resolve, so things that are a phone call, not something that's happening on the scene, they need to contact the ALS or EMS unit that they are assigned to. So each one of those zones, this map clearly delineates who they're supposed to call for issues. And the phone numbers are listed here with the updated new phones for ALS 401 and 403. We've also imparted to everybody, have some grace. If you pick up the phone and you realize I'm at EMS 2 and I'm receiving a phone call that should have gone to ALS 1, field the issue if you can, provide some re-education on, hey, have you guys updated your cell phone list so that they have the correct information? But we're not looking to leave people high and dry. We're certainly not looking to make people's job more difficult from the field. And part of the reason that we've drawn these clear lines of responsibility for administrative issues is so folks know exactly who to call, instead of trying to figure out, is this a captain issue or is this a lieutenant issue? Get it to an EMS supervisor or specialist, and then they will be able to make a determination of who eventually is going to be solving those problems. On-scene responsibilities and roles, they are aware, both the lieutenant rank and captain rank are aware that they may be being utilized as the primary ALS provider on an incident. They may be being used as a second ALS provider on an incident, and that applies to transport as well. They're aware that the decision-making process of how do I transport, or do I need to transport, does the AFR unit need to transport? We'll talk about that in just a moment, but we're aware that that is a big part of our job in these new roles. They're providing that clinical oversight and EMS leadership in the field, modeling excellence, providing what we essentially have been lacking for a little while, is a clear mentorship pathway for our providers to be able to ask questions, to know what right looks like. And then as we continue to educate and grow, they're going to have a growing, expanded scope of practice. Things such as field available blood on all of the units, RSI capabilities in the future, ventilator management in the future, field available antibiotics, things of that nature. We're working very closely with the medical directors to develop exactly what that training pipeline looks like so that it's clearly defined and it's reproducible, because we can't continue to restart and recreate the wheel every 2 years because we need to get new folks. We need to start that process now. They also are going to have a large medical ICS role. So if they're dispatched on a fire, if they're dispatched on a multi-patient event, they've already been briefed on the fact that they're likely going to have a medical component of ICS assigned to them, whether that be the medical group, the rehab group, transportation, welfare, or EMS branch. The decision has been made through operations that it is not a common plan A for them to be the command aide. In fact, the only place where it still commonly is being done is the 4th Battalion, where EMS 4 and Battalion 4 run out of the same station and arrive very close to each other. We're aware that with 8 battalion chiefs plus 2 deputy chiefs, 2 command aides, and an additional Op 6 command aide, that we're often not the right resource. And through cost training, as well as through changes to the way that we do business, we know that it's a normal expectation for a battalion chief to manage the first 10 minutes of an incident without an aide. We've also received the feedback from the field that it is more challenging to start an ICS structure and begin managing a large incident with an aide and then lose them when we have a patient than it is to have just started without one and build from there. The decision-making surrounding who is transporting, every single one of the providers in this initial cohort are all officers. They've all been trained to make decisions. And on every single one of these scenes, if there is an AFR unit, the officer in charge there has been paid and trained to make good decisions. So we're providing some things to consider in order for that best decision to be made in real time, because it's not always going to be the same answer of yes, the EMS specialist shall transport every time versus yes, the AFR unit shall transport every single time. We need to make decisions that make sense in real time. The things that we want folks to be considering is there a need for an advanced scope of practice that that specialist or supervisor has? And if so, clearly they're transporting. Is there a need for multiple additional personnel or just a single additional provider? If we're working a cardiac arrest and we need all hands to be able to do compressions to manage the airway, if it's a need for multiple personnel, then it may be that both units transport. It may be that just the AFR transports, or we may be able to make some other choices. So again, that's something that needs to be weighed. The length of patient contact and the establishment of that patient-provider relationship should weigh in. If the AFR medic has been with the patient for 15 minutes and it is going to cause a longer delay to turn over care and restart the process for an EMS specialist or an EMS supervisor to transport, then it's probably reasonable for that AFR medic to continue the transport. But I want that to be a decision that is made on scene between the decision-making parties that are there. The proximity to the receiving facility, we acknowledge the fact that Engine 30, when they transport to Fairfax Hospital, is probably not impacting second call resiliency. They're still in their first due. So it's important for that to be a consideration. By the flip side, Engine 17 transporting to Fairfax Hospital is a huge impact on second call resiliency on the west end of the county. So there may be more instances where those further geographic stations or EMS zones, their EMS specialist is transporting more frequently than places that are closer to a hospital. And obviously using good judgment, making decisions for the better of the patient's care, not simply it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I'd really like to go back to bed. Yesterday's session brought up the question of, well, what do we do with the vehicle of the specialist if they transport? That's, again, a decision that needs to be made in real time and clearly communicated between the folks that are on scene. The same way that we don't want to leave an ALS bag on scene, we certainly don't want to leave a vehicle on scene unless it's absolutely necessary and it's secured. So you have the options of, if you're upgrading a unit where, let's say, a BLS transport unit needs one paramedic, and so the specialist is going to jump on board, the basic lead off of that vehicle can drive that buggy to the hospital, and then it's an easy self-contained process. Maybe the AFR unit is going to drive the vehicle to the hospital for the EMS specialist if they need both providers or multiple providers, or maybe they take it back to a fire station and secure it there for the specialist to pick up at a later time. Those are the most common scenarios. The question was brought up, and need to put it on folks' radar, that make sure the person who is operating the vehicle is actually allowed to drive the vehicle. And that still needs to be flushed out a bit through safety as well as operations, identifying if you have a brand new second day firefighter who is not cut loose to drive an ambulance and they're taking that specialist's vehicle to the station, they're not cleared to operate emergently. So they need to be aware that they should not be driving that under emergent conditions. Additional guidance will be following with that after we've been able to get final determination through safety programs. So where do we go from here? I'll be honest, the reorganization of our department as a whole is already setting us up to create silos. We need to avoid that. So we need to clearly communicate and collaborate early and often. I said this to senior operations a week or two ago, and I'm saying it again now. I'll continue to say it for months and months into the future. If an issue is coming up, please bring it to my attention, bring it to Chief Barb's attention, bring it to Chief Alvaro's attention so that we can address these issues as they pop up initially. We cannot allow things to go unnoticed, and we can't know everything that's going on in the field. So we're going to want to collaborate specifically with the deputy chiefs, but with all of the battalion chiefs so that we're able to understand what's going on in your stations, what's going on these calls. Are we happy with the system that we've implemented, or do we need to provide re-education, change directions, change anything that needs to go on with this? So that's directly tied to ensuring successful implementation. This next week is going to be spent dealing with the logistical aspects of moving vehicles, moving equipment, making sure that EMS logistics is ready for the stand-up of changes with what they are doing. So that is all going to occur towards the latter half of this week into this weekend. Saturday is our go live date. Our goal is to impact operations as little as possible to ensure that we're still continuing to cover during that time period. So C shift should not see a major impact on the response capabilities. They'll come in on Saturday at 7 a.m. and these units will already be in position, ready to run calls. Once we've gotten the initial implementation up, our next priority is training and building out a clear training plan, not only for the assigned personnel, but for folks who wish to continue or to join in an unassigned capacity. We're working with the medical director to make sure that we have a clear pathway for that. That includes the EMS ODA that we just went through, having a streamlined and, again, fiscally responsible way of disseminating that out to folks who want to be involved. And then moving forward with critical care training, as well as credentialing process, which will be a stepwise approach based off of the care bundles that our medical directors are able to approve. So you'll have basically step 1, step 2, and step 3 of an elevating level of care. That way we're ensuring that we're providing a safe and efficient means of training folks that doesn't cause people to be in over their head. The last thing that we want to do is set people up for failure. We're going to evaluate performance indicators, both from a CAD perspective, a response perspective, procedures, and then also the somewhat more difficult subjective data of how is this working for the providers? Is this helping? Is this growing in the direction that we want it to? Because if we're making a change that isn't improving the day-to-day operations of EMS in our system, then we've failed. So we're going to take that very heavily into consideration. And again, to reemphasize, we have to collaborate together to ensure that we're actually building a system that meets our needs. I am available anytime to answer questions. And then Chief Barb for stuff that is specific to EMS supervisors. He is the point of contact for the captains. But obviously, feel free to reach out to either of us by phone, email, text, carrier pigeon, whatever, because we want to answer questions. We want to collaborate. We cannot possibly anticipate everything that needs to be considered for this. So what questions do you have?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have a question about the unassigned backup pool.
Yes, sir.
How do we deal with staffing of the specialist position? I'm sure we don't have that many backups trained, or if we do, let me know. But it seems like if those people are on vacation or on leave, how do we fill that spot? Thank you.
Absolutely. So the short-term plan, in order to your point, we don't want to hold every single person who agreed to step into this new role. Anyone who currently carries the telestaff credential for EMS supervisor is able to backfill those positions either in a move up or callback capacity. That does not obviously mean that they have the capabilities from a clinical perspective, the same as Chris Seaman has capabilities that I don't have as an EMS supervisor. That's all obviously operated underneath of the Office of the Medical Director credentialing process. But for the short term, anybody who has that EMS supervisor telestaff tag, they are able to backfill those positions. As we move forward, the intent is for us to not be filling a lieutenant position with a captain position as a first line. Obviously, that's not the best way for us to save money as a department or a county. So we're going to expand that relief pool as well as folks that are in that unassigned capacity hopefully to ranks from technician through battalion chief, so that we have a large enough pool that folks are able to be granted leave, as well as providing opportunities for folks who may want to step into one of these positions in the future. You'll also hear that we're changing the terminology from what it previously was of just simply a backup to we're adopting the terminology that special operations has used for years of unassigned, because it clearly illustrates exactly what it is that we intend out of this. Hey, you're not doing this every single day, but you still need to be engaged with the program from a training perspective, as well as from a doing the job perspective. Obviously, it concerns me greatly to have somebody who only rides every once in a while do the job of one of the specialists or supervisors. So we want to have them engaged. We want to have them regularly maintaining competence. Excellent question. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
And as we stated yesterday, with the teams meeting yesterday, we know on day one it's not going to be a perfect system. There are going to be gaps, but as we move forward, we're going to have a continuous evaluation process. So in 2 weeks, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, we're always going to evaluate what we're doing and how we move forward, right? So we are asking for a little bit of grace, because on day one, we know it's not going to be perfect. But again, I think at the end of the day, that one slide that John presented, the silos, that's one thing we do have to work on, and that's the point of this teams meeting, is to have a good open line of communication so that everything is understood early and then we communicate often. So we do appreciate your time, A-Shift. Has to be more questions. Anything. Todd.
I just want everybody to know that this is a growing process, and we would like to build it to where you have a specialist in each battalion or an EMS captain closer to you. I'm not saying we're going to increase the number of EMS captains, because we know they're expensive positions, but we can surely increase the number of EMS specialists / EMS first response. I am truly excited about EMS. The EMS ODA went way beyond my expectations. John Squared Bailey did a great job setting this up, and setting through the 2 weeks. I learned things. So I think it's going to be great, but I think we need to have communications like Chief Alvaro said. And if that means one of the battalion chiefs calling me at 10 o'clock at night, do not hesitate to call me. I already get all of the alarm activations at the pharmacy stations firsthand. So do not hesitate to give me a call. I think this is going to be history making. We've already had agencies reach out to us, even though we haven't implemented it. What old is new with the ALS chase vehicles. When I started, that was kind of the way we did a lot of things back in the day when I was in Spotsylvania and such. So it's the new thing. And when Chicago Fire Department reaches out to us to say, hey, what are you doing with EMS chase vehicles? I think that's an honor, and Fairfax can be back in the national spotlight when this system works perfect. Well, I won't say perfectly, works efficiently when other agencies reach out to see how we're doing it.
I'll chime in and also just say that understand on your end it's going to be a transition for us here too, to figure out where this EMS specialist fits in and how we utilize them. But I think I don't know if this Teams meeting is going to be available to everyone, but I think explaining the roles other than just the one pager you sent out, which is nice, but this discussion might help too, as well as these folks getting out and about to explain their roles and just see how that evolves. And let's come back in a month and see where we are. So
that's an excellent point. And we, the marching orders that everyone, whether a supervisor or a specialist, has been given for the first full month is that they're out messaging, answering questions. Honestly, the gaps that exist, the best way for us to find out about them is for our field personnel to ask questions and say, hey, have you thought about this? What are we going to do when this happens? How are you supposed to handle this? We need that. So absolutely. And I don't believe that there's any issue when Captain Heiner shares this back with us for us to get this up on the EMS SharePoint page as well as distribute it out, because again, consistent messaging is key with this. We're not trying to create different ways of doing things from station to station. Actually, Captain Chia during the EMS ODA brought up that the largest strength of that is that we're all on the same page now. There's not 5 different ways of doing things for every EMS supervisor in every single station and shift. Now we're all operating off of the same sheet of music, making sure that we're able to provide a consistent outcome.